But I must just remind you that the state of the nation continues to grow. I'm sure by now you've watched many of our interviews, but it's not only the interviews that we've got. We've managed to flick a few, and I think Matthew's got a little cut of one of the interviews, Matthew? So let's relive this wonderful moment. Mthlengi, are you joking? I mean, really, you've said some really fancy words. You've said that you've looked at inconsistent service delivery. Do you not live in the same South Africa that I live in?
I do.
The service delivery is pathetic. I mean, it's been nothing less than disgusting.
The ANC has a lot of leaders. They are ethical, they are committed to South Africa, they are patriots. The ANC had no proposal of a 2% VAT. That's just a fact.
Should I invest in your country or shouldn't I? How would you answer that particular investor?
That you can go and invest in India or
So
elsewhere.
go somewhere else.
Yes.
That wonderful moment was brought to you courtesy of the African National Congress. That's their spokesperson, Mthlengi Bengu-Motsiri. She is on the NEC, one of the senior people at the ANC, explaining that South Africa doesn't need investment unless they comply with some of the South African oddities that we have in the way we do business, and explaining away poor service delivery, saying, in fact, the poor service delivery you experience is actually good service delivery, and saying corruption is okay, apparently, because other parties are also corrupt. This is the country we find ourselves in. And one can only ask where we are as a country. And, you know, I think the work that is being done by channels like State of the Nation, not only State of the Nation, we've got Rob Hersov here today, who's involved in some of the other channels that are bringing important news to South Africa. But I think there's no doubt that the landscape has changed. The world has changed. I just don't know if our political parties have changed to meet the changing world. The days of keeping the country in the dark, the days of doing things and getting political cover in Parliament because you've got a massive majority are over. It seems like the ANC just don't get it. They just don't seem to understand that you can no longer have a corrupt minister, a corrupt police minister, and then let him go on paid leave and that's going to be okay. They're just not going to have the political cover. It's not going to happen. There's going to be debates in Parliament. The ANC has 40% of the vote. It was that well-known genius himself, Fikile Mbalula, who said that in the past, they managed to convince Parliament that a swimming pool was a fire pool. They can't do that anymore. Everybody seems to get it, but the ANC doesn't seem to get it. We now have our latest scandal, where KZN Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi made some startling allegations. What were those allegations? They've got a unit that was started down in KZN looking into political killings, with a bit of basic detective work, because let's face it, in South Africa, you hardly have to keep things a secret. The basic detective work shows that it's not just political killings in KZN. It links all the way back to political killings in other places around the country. It also links to drug syndicates in Gauteng. How does the ANC respond? To shut down the commission that was looking into these things, to close that unit. Those days are over, but they don't seem to get it. So here we are with 50% unemployment. and more to come thanks to our problems with the US and tariffs. And what's the response to that? Is to roll out the craziest employment equity legislation that is possible to come up with. This is the kind of legislation that would have made Hendrik Verwoerd proud. When you tell people who they should hire, not based on whether they can do the job, but based on what they look like. Apparently, we fought a struggle against this kind of thing, but not in South Africa. Apparently, that needs to be perpetuated. And it's going to have the same consequences. The country is going to go in the same direction. And once again, we will become the pariah of the world. We'll become the skunk of the world. It's only South Africa doing this kind of self-mutilation. It's absolutely crazy. This kind of madness doesn't seem to be limited to the African National Congress. We've got the Democratic Alliance in the government of national unity. Now, the idea was wonderful. Everybody embraced the idea. Let's put the best of the best together. And maybe, if we work on the talents of everybody, we could get the best people in the best positions. But they didn't figure on the ANC's duplicity and end up being bit players, being treated like a small part of a bigger government of national unity, where they're being scolded for not complying with ANC policies. So what do? Very brave John Steenhuisen keeps on writing red lines, marking red lines in lipstick, I presume, because everybody seems to cross them with impunity. What's the point of being in a government of national unity if you can do nothing while you're in that government? Get out. Be in opposition. It's crazy that you're taking the ANC to court while propping them up in government. Let them leave. Let the ANC face the motion of no confidence. They've warned us that what they're doing over there is preventing us from the doomsday coalition. Well, it turns out that the doomsday in the coalition is the ANC. The others are just petty thieves. We know what Jacob Zuma is about. He's only about crime. He's only about theft. We lived under him for 9 years. There's one thing a crook understands. A crook understands that if he's going to steal money from you, you need to earn money. While Jacob Zuma was president, he kept the economy going because he had to steal. I'm not that scared of Jacob Zuma because I know that the first thing he'll do is pay some attention to the economy because he needs to steal. Whereas this crowd don't seem to understand, that's the ANC I'm referring to, or the rest of the ANC, don't seem to understand that in order to steal, you need something to steal. So we've got this mess where the DA, I'm an old poker player. I've played cards since I was a kid. Nice Lebanese boy from the south, what do you expect? The one thing you don't do is tell the other people that are sitting around the card table what you're scared of. You don't sit down and say, if you tell me you've got a trip, I'm going to fold. Why did the DA go into this government of national unity? To say, we've got to keep this because we've got to prevent that from happening. A year down the line, all the ANC has done has played on this weakness of the DA, saying, if you want to leave, we'll go to those guys. What is the ANC's biggest fear? The ANC's biggest fear by 1,000 miles is being in a coalition with MK, because Jacob Zuma will eat them alive. It's the party that the ANC would least want to be in coalition with. Then we get on to the EFF. There's a party that was offering something different in a South African sense. Pure communism. not just Marxism, but communism a la Venezuela, where you just trash the entire place. The problem is that it had the hallmarks of the same thing, one-person dictatorship under Julius Malema, as he said whenever it was, December in 2023, ahead of the build-up to the 2024 election. Nobody better challenge him for the leadership position. We've heard those words before. Fidel Castro comes to mind. These were people that insisted that we can be a communist party, but nobody better challenge me for the leadership. We see it right now with Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping. So we understand what the EFF is about. It's a one-man band communist country, communist party that has prevailed in certain parts of the world. They've managed to get elected, and they were true to their word. Somebody was in charge until he, left the mortal coil. So we understand what the EFF is about. It's about one-person domination. Do you think the ANC want to be part of a coalition with them? Maybe Mashatile does, but nobody else does. So what are the DA doing in this government of national unity? And it is a bit tiresome that we keep on, talking about the DA as if they're the only people that matter. There are other parties in that government of national unity that are hiding behind the DA, letting them take all the hits. I recently spoke to Corne Mulder. He's sitting there. All he wants is to eat a few of the DA votes. He's not really coming up with any solutions. He's sitting there letting the DA take all the big shots while they sit behind him. We've got that gangster organization, the Patriotic Alliance, that prop up the ANC and the EFF in Johannesburg. And let's just see how well that's working. Now, so what I'm saying is, when we talk about the DA, we mustn't forget those little hangers-on behind them. We understand that Action SA exists only because they hate the DA. They are driven, I think they just have, maybe dartboards up with just DA faces on it, but that seems to be the only thing that gets them up in the morning. And then we have a couple of new parties that came to the scene, and I've got to say, have been quite busy. And that is, little parties like Rise Mzansi, Build One South Africa. Those parties have shown so much promise, and they could make such a difference. But they always stumble at the last hurdle. Well, I suppose at the first hurdle, and that is around ideology. Every single one of those parties is just offering ANC policies. I've discussed that ad nauseum with Songezo Zibi, with Musi Maimane. These are not the policies that ring true with South Africans. What do South Africans want? South Africa, and surveys show, and behavior shows, is a deeply conservative country. There is not one shred of evidence that shows me, and I don't know unless you're seeing something different, that shows me that South Africans would make good communists. I don't see it. What does it take to be a good communist, if there is such a thing? There's a very simple thing. You need enormous national discipline, because one person's going to make the rules and everybody better follow them. And you've got lots of guns for the people that step out of line. We can't get South Africans to stop at red traffic lights. Does this really sound like a nation ready to become communists? I don't think it's in the makeup of the people. What I do see in the makeup of the people is ambition. What do our people that steal money do? What's their first action? Is it to go and share it with the people? No. It's to go and buy nice cars, to go on international holidays. I do not see communism here at all, in anything that we see. I see burning capitalism, ready to be unshackled. But instead, we've got parties that go out there, that talk redistribution, land expropriation, everything that people aren't talking about. People want to work and they want to have the opportunity to climb the ladder. That's all I'm seeing in the majority of South Africans. I do not see South Africans as dying to get a government grant. I see a party in the ANC dying to give people grants. I don't see people going out there saying, I want more for free. I see a nation prepared to work. Look at the wonderful staff here today. You know, I don't know about you, but for me to get out here and to be here, to drive the 15 minutes to the Sandton Convention Center and be here by 6 o'clock was, really hard. Imagine the staff that had to get up at least an hour or two earlier than I had to get up this morning, and they have to do it every morning. This is not a country that doesn't want to work. This is a country that does want to work. We just don't want leaders that stand in our way. But yet that's what we are offered. And I just do not understand it. I don't understand it at all. And I'm here, I want to take exception to something that gets said to me a lot. When people say that, South Africans they'll vote for the same people again and again. No, they don't. It's a big emotional tie to the liberation movement. And in a mere 30 years, to get them to lose the majority has taken enormous will of the people. South Africans are brave. They take to the streets. They're not scared. They've said that they don't want the ANC in government. Otherwise, they would have voted for them, and they didn't. And I think that what we all have to do, it's incumbent upon all of us to stop saying, people are just going to vote for the ANC, or they're just going to vote. No, they're not. They didn't the last time. They didn't in the 2021 local government elections. They didn't in the 2016 local government elections. They're just looking for alternatives. Where are our free market parties? There's one, and that's the DA, and they won't understand that people need to see themselves represented in that party. And it drives me absolutely mad that the DA don't see that. Because if they became a bit more acceptable to the bulk of South Africans, they would win the election running away. But instead, I always say that they're just a little bit too comfortable down in the Western Cape. Sorry, Rob. I think they got down to Cape Town and closed the gate behind them and said, thank God we don't have to worry about the rest of the country. Well, we sit up here, not quite in the Wild West, in the crazy north of the country where you need to fight. And I don't think the DA has got the stomach for the fight. They didn't have the stomach for the fight in Johannesburg. They didn't have the stomach for the fight in Tshwane. And when their mayors were under fire in both cases, you never saw their leaders anywhere. Those aren't leaders. If your leader doesn't pitch up when you're going to have a fight, believe me, he's not a leader. And that's what we're seeing out of the Democratic Alliance. So where did South Africa go to from here? Well, what did Mike Tyson say? Probably the best quote of all time. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think we've got the same thing in politics, and we've got the same thing in, just in general in the country. You can carry on with crazy social engineering until you run out of money. I lived the first half of my life under a socially engineered country, apartheid. And it worked just fine if you were white, until you ran out of money. And suddenly it stopped working. Suddenly the pseudo-liberals were saying, oh, maybe we should negotiate. Suddenly people were going off to Dakar in Senegal to go speak to the ANC in exile. Why? Because we ran out of money. It wasn't out of the goodness of the collective white heart that they suddenly decided that maybe it's time to end apartheid. It was the economic reality that the country had run out of money. Well, guess what? We replaced one system of social engineering with another. And guess what? We've run out of money again. And this is going to change everything. It is busy changing everything because the country has run out of money. This problem that we've had with the budget is underpinned by a couple of issues. South Africa pays more than 1 billion rand every single day in interest on our debt. In other words, that's one Zondo commission every day, one national dialogue every day, one commission of inquiry every day that we pay out in interest. We've got an economy that keeps on shrinking. We're at war with our biggest export partner in the world. It will not last. Anybody that understands economics knows that it will not last. It cannot. Yeah, I can put myself out there. Boy, the last couple of years have been tough. That bank manager phones me relentlessly. I see the call center, I throw my phone away. Why? Because they want their money back. And I know that I can't pay them back. It changes your behavior. South Africa is going to have to change its behavior. There seems to be a thought amongst the ANC, the EFF, MK, that somehow there's a new world order. Here's the news. There's no new world order. It's the same old world order. Everybody points to problems in the US. Can I tell you why they do that? Because you get to see the problems in the US. You see when there's a protest against the extradition of foreigners or whatever. We get to see, warts and all. You don't get to see that when it happens in China. You don't get to see that the Chinese economy is an absolute mess. I would suggest everybody here, your next car should be a Chinese car. Because that's not really helping China. In actual fact, the more Chinese cars you buy, the more it's sending China to the poorhouse. Every single one of their cars is subsidized by the Chinese taxpayer. So in other words, buy another Chinese car and you'll be making them even poorer. Now tell me where the economics works in that. We've got people in this country that believe that Russia are winning the war. Really? Russia had to go and get North Korean troops because they've run out of men to kill. Can you imagine that? A real country that we love is fighting a war that they can't fight. And we, as South Africans, some people think this is going to take over from rich countries like the US. It's madness. Not going to happen. Not in this lifetime. Not going to happen. Now let me explain to you why it's not going to happen. There's a problem with authoritarian countries. In order to be an authoritarian country, like some of our mates, Russia, China, Iran, you can't afford to have people in authoritarian countries that think differently to you or that are smarter than you. But on the other hand, you need to run an economy So you need innovation. That comes out of smart people. This has been the paradox. This has been the problem with authoritarian countries forever. And eventually they have purges. You have this sort of situation that you had just ahead of the Second World War, where both Russia and Germany had their generals killed because they felt threatened. And then they had to go fight a war without generals. Those authoritarian countries would need to do one of two things. Either run their countries like proper authoritarian countries. In other words, nobody's allowed to look left or right. The economies will tank tomorrow. That's what happened to the Soviet Union. Or they'd have to free the people by allowing those people to think and challenge. And if they did that, those people would start wanting more rights and free and fair elections, etc., and changes of views. So we are backing the wrong horse in South Africa, quite badly. Recently we saw Iran being attacked. Where were their allies? Russia's got no body to send them, to help them. China are sitting there saying, oh, we're out of this one as well. We'll sit out. These are our allies. These are the people we think are going to buy our oranges and our bottles of wine. Really. On what universe is this going to happen? So what I would like to suggest is that once again we've got politicians, much like, this South Africa 2025 looks a lot to me like South Africa in 1985. A situation that cannot last, but leaders who keep on convincing themselves that it will last. It won't last. The US have said, we'll trade with you. We will do a lot of trade, and we're going to hear more later from Rob, from JJ, but I know Rob was as recently in America. America has made 4 demands on South Africa in order to get rid of those tariffs tomorrow. Make rural killings, especially farm killings, priority crime. And do something about it. Instead of going to the Oval Office saying, we'll just murder everyone. But that's okay. So don't call it genocide. We're killing more people than die in a war zone. Condemn the singing of Kill the Boer. That's what our president said in the Oval Office, and then landed at OR Tambo and said, no, they can sing it. It's an old struggle song. Their third requirement was remove BEE on American companies. Do you know that Chinese and Indian companies don't have to comply with BEE? Why should anybody else's companies have to comply with something that other countries don't have to comply with? It's madness. And the fourth requirement was scrap this idea of null compensation. Every country will need to expropriate land for the public interest. That happens. You want to build a highway, there happens to be a thing in your way, you expropriate the land. There's a fair market value. Stop with the null compensation. Because you put that in the books, and I'm taking legal advice because I would love to challenge this. And I know very little about the law. But while we have expropriation in the public interest at null compensation, surely every property should be then valued at null, and surely none of us should be paying rates. There's probably some lawyers over here. If I've got something wrong, that's got to be the implied value the way I see it. I would love to challenge that in court. But those are the 4 preconditions that America has put for us to do trade with them. Our politicians, like Mthlengi said to me in that interview, could not give a damn about unemployed South Africans. In actual fact, the thing that the ANC hates the most are black people with agency. Black people that are not dependent on them. And we must understand what they are doing when they do this. They are taking the best and the brightest in our black community, and they are seriously gifted, and there's a lot of talent there, and they are putting them to go and work in dead-end BEE positions in corporates and BEE positions in government, instead of going out there to start their own businesses. Why? Because they're dead scared that if black people start running their own businesses, they'll start wanting to make their own decisions, and they'll start complaining about potholes in the road. It's just a hell of a lot easier to keep those people forever indebted to the government, forever thinking that you've only got your position because the government's got BEE, not because you're good enough. How disgusting that any government should say that to its people. So I think South Africa has got a lot of problems at the moment, but they lie with our politicians. And much like we experienced here in the early 90s, you could unshackle this country, and we could become a very rich, very successful country very quickly if we just got over ourselves, if our politicians would just be held to account. But nobody has a majority, and quite understandably. Therefore, they're all politically vulnerable. They've also lost control of the media. Remember, we used to have a country in which you had media that came in two speeds. Either state-owned media that said what the government wanted them to say, or private media that only operated because the government gave them licenses. That's why you have a station like 702 Cape Talk that are more pro-ANC than even SABC and News 24, right? All beholden to government to operate. Those days are gone. People are getting news from places like State of the Nation, Truth Report that Rob's involved in. JJ on YouTube gets far more hits there than what he did when he was on television. The truth will come out. They can't hide it anymore. If they could hide it, we wouldn't have had the charade that we've had with General Mkhwanazi over the last week. So I'm not asking you to do anything but to keep doing what you're doing, but please understand that South Africa is changing as we speak. This is not me hoping anything, it's changing. Correct people when they say people just vote blindly. People do not vote blindly. They just got some terrible choices to choose from, terrible options to choose from. So, am I pessimistic? Beyond belief. I've got two talented daughters that are both working in the UK. It pains the hell out of me that they're there. They don't want to be there. But they don't see a future for themselves here, and it's hard to argue. So am I pessimistic? Yes. Am I optimistic? Even more so, because we could turn this around tomorrow. If we decided that we didn't want any more of this, and we were all going to be treated as South Africans, and get this place out from under the jackboot of nationalist politicians, I am very optimistic about the country, if that were to happen. And it's darkest before dawn. I remember South Africa in the very late 1980s, where you would have bet every single cent you had on no peaceful outcome and no prosperous outcome. And within a couple of years, at that time I was working at the stock market. I was a stockbroker. And I'll never forget the craziest thing ever. The day the country sobered up was also a very sad day. It was the day Chris Hani lay in a pool of blood in his driveway. And we thought, oh, that's it. And you know what happened? The stock market started to go up and didn't stop going up for another 6 years, because that brought everybody to the negotiating table seriously, to understand that they have to stop the bickering and the petty squabbling and work in the interest of the country. So let's hope that we don't have to have an incident like that brings us to our senses. But South Africa is sitting at a very difficult time at the moment, but this one can go either way, much like it could in those days of the late 1980s. I see no difference. If you ask me if I'm optimistic or pessimistic, my answer is yes. What I am optimistic about is the state of the nation. You probably already watch our weekly update. You probably already watch, in my opinion pieces that we put out twice a week on State of the Nation. I would urge you to watch the Political Insider, which is our new short news coverage channel that we've got. If you haven't subscribed to that, that thing is growing like crazy, so please watch. We'll put up the links. You can get all our links through on all the channels on Sona Koza, which is our handle. But we've got a great day ahead of us. We're going to have breakfast now, and after breakfast we're going to hear from Rob Hersov, who Rob Hersov, you know, he's one of those oaks, speaks his mind, not everybody's cup of tea. Recently voted the 7th most hated white people in South Africa. Well done, Rob. And after I confirmed Rob's participation, I nearly choked when I was watching an interview where he said, "That's it, I'm taking a break from public engagements." And I'm thinking, by Lord, Rob, you have to speak at our event in a couple of weeks. But Rob has honored that obligation that he made to me. So thank you, Rob, for coming. And then JJ Tabane, a man we miss from our screens, a man who did speak truth to power. And probably the last successful show on ETV. Is that right, JJ? So we're in for a bit of fun a little bit later. We're going to hear from both of them, and then we're going to have a Q&A up here on stage. So please enjoy your breakfast. Thank you very much for coming once again. And we'll get our guests up here as soon as we've done with our breakfast. Thank you so much.